world doesn't necessarily reward effort. The world rewards execution. And the paradox of that is that in order to execute at a high level to the point that the world rewards you, you have to put out an insane amount of effort. You have to be willing to put yourself out there over and over and over again and fail over and over and over again, and then go back and reassess why you failed and critically assess yourself, and then come up with a new strategy that you're going to implement moving forward.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a return listener, I'd be grateful for your rating or review. And if you dig this episode, give us a like or share. And now, whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode has worked with Power 5 sports teams, Fortune 500 companies, U.S. national teams, and many, many more. He is the CEO of Pazik Performance Group. You can get his free mental game booklet at pazikperformancegroup.com, linked up here. He is also the author of Ask More, Tell Less for Coaches. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, Tyler Pazik.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Tyler, how are you doing today?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I think in all my episodes, I think this is the first guest named Tyler. So excited to double up the Tyler wisdom today, mostly coming from you on this episode. So to start, wanted to just let people know a little bit about your journey, how you got into mental performance coaching, and then what you mainly do now.
Yeah, so I think, my coaching journey started when I was like 9 years old, really, I would say. I was playing on a little league team and I got pulled from the game, and I sat on the end of the bench and I was crying, I think, but because I don't know why I just got pulled, and then my coach comes down an inning later and he's like, Tyler, when I put you at second base, we need you to play second base. You can't be over there at shortstop trying to teach our shortstop how to field a ground ball. And I was like, okay, I get it. But so I would say that my coaching started then. And then when I was 19, I coached a 15U team, and I coached in that same travel organization, which was the Illinois Indians. And I'm actually helping them out again this summer. Illinois Indians travel baseball out of Chicago area. And I coached with them through the time I was 24. And when I was 23, I just got done playing baseball at Indiana State, which is a Division I baseball team in Terre Haute, Indiana. And after I got done with them, I was supposed to be the college assistant coach for the Metro League, which is a college league outside of Chicago. And the first day, the head coach quit. And so I was the assistant coach, and then I got elevated to the head coach. So I'm a 23-year-old coaching. Literally, there were other 23-year-olds on my team and everything. And I coached that for 2 years. And after college, I got done, and I was like working 3 different jobs, waking up at 5 or 6 every morning, going to bed at 10 or 11 at night. And I'm like, there's just got to be a better way. And so I was like, okay, what do I love to do? Well, I love to coach. And like, what type of coach do I want to be? And I took a sports psychology class in undergrad, and then I had been diving into it a little bit more after college. And I looked it up, and I was like, okay, can you make money being a mental coach, And sure enough, you can. And so then I applied to all the different programs in the country and decided on going to TCU down in Fort Worth, Texas. And one of my mentors that I worked for while I was down there was Brian Kane, who was also on your podcast. Yeah. And he really taught me the business side of mental performance, which I'm so grateful for, because without him, I wouldn't have my business for sure. And then the other guy that was pivotal in my journey is Nelson Gord, who owns the Illinois travel baseball program that I just talked about, because he's the one who actually sent me down to meet Kane in person for a weekend experience with him and whatnot. And when I went to TCU, I would be up at 4 a.m. going over to Kane's house and, riding bikes, going on runs, just sort of picking his brain and learning from him for those 2 years that I lived down there. And yeah, and then afterwards I started my own business, the Pazik Performance Group, and now we work with everywhere from 9 years old to 90 years old, anybody that wants to get better at mental performance, but mainly in the baseball, softball, basketball world, at the high school and college and professional levels. So, and then the three pillars that I talk about a lot are confidence, leadership, and communication skills. Those are the three that I really focus on.
Love
So
it.
that's sort of how I got started.
Gotcha. Couple questions on your journey. I guess one, for young coaches, what was maybe a challenge and something you overcame as, being a 23-year-old coach and kind of coaching people that were your same age? What was something you kind of took from that experience?
So I think the fact that I had already 4 years of coaching under my belt, because I had coached as an assistant coach and a head coach in the summers throughout my time at Indiana State. So, when I was 19, I was coaching 15-year-olds. When I was 20, I was coaching all sorts of teams. I was the rover. I was like, hey, who needs a coach?
Cool.
Who needs a coach? Who needs a player also? Because I was still playing at the time. And so I would just go and play games and then coach whenever I could. And so when I was 23, I felt like I was actually ready for that position. And I remember when I was 22, I was still coaching the younger kids in high school. And there was a guy that I went to be the assistant coach with, and he was the head coach. And we get done with the game, and we're sitting in his car to drive home afterwards, because he drove me to that game. And I'm like, was this your first game that you've ever coached? And he's like 4 years older than me. So at the time he was probably like 26, 27. And he's like, yes, actually, like, how did you know? And I'm like, man, there's just some things that you did that I could tell you were like a first time head coach, like super emotional, sort of coaching them in the game, like yelling at them from the dugout, like, hey, we got to be better. We got to make this throw to this place, and so on and so forth. And so it really didn't feel like there was much of a challenge there. And also, I think it helped that I was coaching college kids and I just got done with college. So there was already instant rapport, and
Sure.
like I spoke their language.
Yeah.
And I really just wanted to have fun and kick ass while we were playing. So it felt natural to me.
Yeah, no, have fun and kick ass. Most kids that age will, you do that right, they'll rally behind that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, one of the things that I feel like I did really well that year was I set the expectation ahead of time.
Yeah.
So like I set that expectation that we're going to work hard and that we're going to be tough. We were the Illinois Indians, so we call ourselves the Tribe. And I came up with the 5 values for Tribe, which are toughness, respect, integrity, be in the moment, and energy. And so I would always come back to those 5 values of the organization whenever I was talking to them. And I feel like that really helped catapult us to be better than what our skill level told us we were going to be.
Awesome.
Like there was that synergistic effect to it.
Yeah. And follow up on Kaner. So let me get this also right. You got sent down to his house and you didn't really know who he was or what kind of energy he brought. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, I love, as you mentioned, he's been on the podcast. I think, I've heard you on his podcast. One of the best in the business. I think when people that point you to that, there's so much you can learn from Brian. One of the things on that podcast you talked about your experience with TCU and the kind of academic side. Talk about the dichotomy of what you learned from someone like Brian in that applied world versus kind of that academic TCU and really in your work today, what pans out on a day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. I would say that there's really 3 different areas of sports psychology. And I think I mentioned this on that podcast, but you have the applied side, which I got from Kane. And then you have the research side, which I got from going to TCU. And then you have the clinical side, which I plan on going and getting my PhD in counseling psychology to sort of give me that well-rounded view and really help me as a sports psych be able to help other people. But from Kane, I got those applied strategies, like how to actually take the research and put it into play with those athletes on the field. I would say that that's one thing that makes me a little different, is that like I can help athletes on the field, not just off the field. And I think originally um, people come to me and they want, or parents come to me with their kids and they want them to be like more fulfilled off the field because they see their kid is, sad when they come home, or they might not be themselves, right? Or they don't know who they are. So they want those off the field sort of life skills. But then when I talk to the athlete, it's through that realm of sport. So we talk a lot about the on-field strategies that they can employ. And then once we get the
Yeah.
understanding that, okay, like sport is a strategy game at the end of the day, then we can take that into life and be like, okay, life is a strategy game as well.
Yeah.
So I would say, going back to your question, like what did I get from him? It's like the on-field stuff. And then what I got from TCU is like how to look at research, how to critically think about the research and dissect it, and then take the aspects that they're doing this research on and apply them straight onto the field with athletes. A lot of that is meditation, I would say, but also just this morning I was working with this girl, Emily Meyer, who's a top 20 CrossFit athlete in the world. And we were talking about the alter ego effect, which there's a lot of research out there about taking on this alternative personality to ultimately help you perform when you need to perform.
Yeah.
So that would be, again, taking the research and then putting it into play in her realm, which is CrossFit, but it works with all sports and really any profession that you want to get into.
Let's talk about the ego, the alter ego state, because I think I've had another guest also talk about how, even sometimes, being able to talk to yourself and create that ego, like, help create self-talk by giving it a name, naming who that other person is you're talking to. Talk more about the kind of alter ego.
Yeah. So the guy who popularized the alter ego is Todd Herman, who's another mental performance coach, and he wrote a book called The Alter Ego Effect, which I highly recommend. It's a really good, quick read. He brings up a lot of research in it, and then his stories are pretty intriguing as well. But he talks about like Superman and Clark Kent, and he's like, when you think about Superman and Clark Kent, like which one is the alter ego? And most people, they would say, oh, Superman's alter ego, but it wasn't. Like Superman was who he was, and he needed to create this alter ego of Clark Kent to blend into society so that he could study humans, So in sport, your alter ego is this persona that you're taking on that exhibits the values and character skills that you need in order to perform at your highest level. So maybe in life, or maybe if you're a high school student or a college athlete, or even a parent, maybe in life and at work, you're this sort of introverted, quiet person that has a lot of self-doubt about like who they are and what they're doing. Well, you can create this alter ego that when you step into it, this alter ego is the opposite of that. It's this extroverted, like high energy, outgoing, confident person. And by taking on this alter ego, when you go into that domain, whatever it might be, and you start acting like them, over time, you become more of that person. You basically build up evidence in the case that you are that person. And then before you know it, you're just acting like that all the time. And you go from this person that it was experiencing a lot of self-doubt to this person that now all of a sudden is experiencing a lot of self-confidence in that realm. One person that I think about is Rashard Mendenhall. Have you ever heard that name? He was a running back for the Steelers. So he actually went to my high school. And fun fact about him, my sister was his clarinet stand partner in high school.
Oh,
but
multi-talented.
yeah. But after he got done playing with the Steelers, he was a writer for the HBO show Ballers with The Rock and whatnot. And he talked about how, like, when he first started writing for that show, he just could not focus. And so he thought back to when he was training for football. He's like, how could I get so locked in, like instantly, as soon as I got on the field to warm up and start practicing and stuff like that. But when I sit down, it's like I have a scatterbrain. And so he's like, well, the one thing I always did right before I went out there and practice was I would put my headphones on. He's like, so maybe if I put my headphones on here, I'll be able to also have that elite focus and be able to sit down and just write. And so sure enough, he would just put his headphones on, and literally just that action of him putting on the headphones helped him focus on writing.
Yeah.
And so that was the, again, that alter ego effect. That, and then also that goes into a different skill in mental performance, which I talk about a lot, which is like mental triggers that you have.
Mm.
So like humans love to give meaning to things, right? And so he was putting meaning and he was putting an intention behind this physical action. It was like a mental checkpoint for him to check in with himself. So he would do that physical action of putting on his headphones, and then he had the intention of being focused while he was writing. And that can carry over into really anything that you do. It might be when you go to the field. Maybe you're a football player, and it's like, as soon as I put on my pads, this is like me turning into this aggressive mindset and this like beast out there on the field. Or when you go up to the plate as a baseball player, you tap your cleats with your bat, and by tapping your cleats with your bat, you're telling yourself, all right, hit the ball hard, right? And so you're just simplifying the process for yourself, and you're giving yourself an intention and a focus to help you perform in that area.
Love it. Tons of tools and knowledge to take away. You mentioned the book Alter Ego by Tom Herman. Another great book I've heard you mention, I've read The Mind Gym by Gary Mack. What are some other books that you either recommend or that you've enjoyed recently in kind of the sports psych realm?
So the first book that pops to mind, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I will,
Toot it.
is Ask More, Tell Less for Coaches, which I wrote with Greg Warburton. And it's all about communication skills and being able to communicate with your coaches and athletes at a higher level. And there's like so many different strategies in there that help you improve your communication skills. Like one of them, for instance, is being more specific with your question asking. So instead of just asking a kid like, hey, why'd you do that? Which could come off as very judgmental. Usually just by saying the word why, it's like somebody's poking you in the chest, right? So instead of saying, why'd you do that? You could say, hey, what's one reason that you decided to do what you just did, right? And now all of a sudden that's, first of all, getting you on the same side of the issue with your athlete instead of you versus your athlete, and like you having that power dynamic. You're getting rid of that and looking at the issue as it is, which is just the issue. The problem is the problem. The person is not the problem, right? And so you ask that question, and then not only that, it simplifies the process for them. They don't have to give you all the answers or all the reasons. They just need to give you maybe one reason to get you started. And then a common answer to that question is, I don't know why I did that. It's like, okay, well, like, what's one thought that pops to mind around why you might have done that, right? Or what's, give yourself a minute to think. After you think for a minute, what do you think about?
Yep.
What's a reason that you did that? Or, okay, you might not know right now, but let's go home and sleep on it, and then we'll talk about it again tomorrow, right? So you're opening up the conversation now instead of just you telling them to fix something, or you really imparting yourself on the situation instead of helping them bolster that self-reliance.
You're gonna get as a coach, you're gonna get better feedback. And I think, when you get into you want deliberate feedback, you want high quality feedback, and it needs to be a two-way street with athletes and coaches often. So I think, those kind of techniques, I think one I always try to use too is, how'd you experience that play? Right. I mean, kind of like, and again, try to remove some judgment of how I experienced observing the play as a coach. But I love little things like that. We'll link up your book as well. Any other ones that kind of come to mind?
So Ask More, Tell Less is a really good one for communication skills. Another one that's really good for communication is Boundary Boss by Terry Cole.
Okay.
She writes it for women, but I mean, it's applicable to everybody.
Right.
And I actually like how she wrote it because I'm obviously a guy, so like kind of learning that side of things and
Mm,
how emails see the world, um, and how she helps females really helps me be a better coach when I'm working with
sure.
female athletes as well.
No doubt.
So those two are really good. And then one of the only books that I've read in one sitting is Living with a Seal by Jesse Itzler.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I opened it up one morning and I didn't put it down until I finished it. And it was awesome. But yeah, it's all about this multi-millionaire. I think Jesse Itzler is worth like 2 or 300 million dollars, and he hires David Goggins before David Goggins was David
Right.
Goggins.
Yeah.
Um, he hired him to train him for 31 days, and it's sort of their journey together throughout those 31 days, and just how hard David Goggins pushed him and what he learned
Yeah.
from David Goggins. I think it's an awesome book. I have recommended it to people that were like, "Oh yeah, it came off as he just seems so egotistical and whatnot." But I've only really gotten one or two of those, and I've recommended and I've read that book too with, um, at this point, probably hundreds of people.
Cool. Very cool. We'll link up your website here as well, but I know if you go there, one of your resources, there was caught my attention, 12 reasons you suck as a leader. Uh,
Yeah.
and looking at that list, since it's the Elevate podcast, we're just going to jump to number 8. It was, you can't fail. And then you said something in there in the text I wanted you to talk about because I thought it was interesting. Winners lose more than losers lose. Winners lose more than losers lose. Explain
Mhm.
that. Explain that a little bit.
Winners lose more than losers lose. So there's sort of something I've been talking about a lot lately, actually, over the last probably couple of months. And it's that the world doesn't necessarily reward effort, the world rewards execution. And the paradox of that is that in order to execute at a high level to the point that the world rewards you, you have to put out an insane amount of effort. You have to be willing to put yourself out there over and over and over again and fail over and over and over again, and then go back and reassess why you failed and critically assess yourself, and then come up with a new strategy that you're going to implement moving forward. Right. And so when I say winners lose more than losers lose, what I'm referring to there is that the winner has put themselves out there so many times. They've put out the effort so many times with these different strategies that they're partaking in, that they finally find one that works. And that's why they ultimately wind up winning. Whereas the loser, they fail once and then they give up, or they fail once and then they quit. Whereas the winner, they fail over and over and over again, and they understand that, okay, like even if I fall on my face, like I'm falling forward. There's no such thing as one step forward, two steps back. That might be what it feels like because you're falling on your face, but
Sure.
really if you see it as like you're still just falling forward, you'll ultimately be moving towards that point where the world rewards you for your effort, which is, at that point where you're getting rewarded for the execution of, that that play, or your skill set.
Love it. Um, One other question we always like to ask as we wrap up, we could wave a magic wand, and tomorrow morning, every student athlete out there is blessed with a mental skill. What are they going to wake up with tomorrow?
Hmm.
It's your
The
magic wand, so do it. Do what you will.
Yeah. The magic skill that everybody has is the ability to catch their thoughts and then accept their thoughts and replace them if they must. So I come back to this, like, this is how you basically restructure your brain. And a lot of athletes don't understand that they're always thinking. I just did I worked with a high school out in Maine. What was that, like a month or two ago now? And at the end, we were talking about their number one takeaways from the weekend. And one of the girls was like, I just thought this was an empty space up here. But now I realize that, Like I'm always thinking about something. And so it's either a productive thought or an unproductive thought, and it's being able to refocus back onto the productive ones. And so the acronym CAR, CAR, is probably the skill that I would teach everybody. Or if everybody woke up in the morning, it would be that, because you need the ability to catch your thoughts in order to change them. And you need to be willing to accept them in order to move forward. You don't need to like everything you thought, said, and did and believed, but you do need to accept it in order to change it. And then, yeah, like CAR is replace or run. So like you catch your thought, you admit and accept it, and then you either replace it if it's unproductive, or you run with it if it is productive. Like sometimes you catch yourself having fun. Like you don't want to replace yourself having fun,
If it's
you know,
going,
or think about what you need to think about, or be focused on what you need to be focused on. Like if you're focused on what you need to be focused on in the moment, it's like, hey, let's run with it. Hey, let's hold this focus as long as you can. I know now that I'm coaching again this summer, and I coached a little bit this spring as well, that's one thing that I'll tell athletes during a game, especially a pitcher that's on the mound. I'll be like, hey, hold that focus right there. And so that would be them running with it, running with that focus, running with that thought that they're having in that moment. So that's the one thing.
Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be